I've always been under the impression that the world is round.
Well, it's an entirely false impression. It's been foisted on you. The Greeks started this tale about 500 BC as something that was so unreasonable and so outrageous that it would catch people's imagination, and it did. It's so outrageous and such an absurd and a silly and a downright asinine idea that it just captures people's brains.
But wait a minute, Charles. How can you account for the fact, then, that people like Magellan sailed around the world?
The simplest thing in the world, like you can sail around a lake. If you have a great lake, one of those great lakes there in Michigan, a great big thing, a little island in the center, like is where your magnet is, and you're sailing by compass, which operates off the magnet. And when you start to sail east, you're not, sailing in a straight line because the magnet keeps pulling you. So you're just sailing around.
You're sailing in a circle
around the North Pole is what you're sailing around. In other words, you're going around the world, but it's on a flat surface.
How do you know it's flat?
Well, I tell you, I'm glad you asked that. It's the simplest thing in the world. People think, this is a great complex problem, and we have these philosophers and books and universities trying to calculate nothing to it. I mean, how would you find out if you had 40 acres if it was flat, or at the floor of your room? We just, went out and checked it, and it was, and found it was flat. Most of the world, of course, is water.
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously, what would you do? Well, of course, we already know that it is the law of physics, the law of God, the law of nature. Water seeks its own level and lays flat. So, going out on water surfaces, lakes, rivers, and the ocean, find out how much curvature, if the world were a globe 25,000 miles around, how much curvature there would be a mile, 10 miles, and just go out and sight it like using surveyor's instruments and find out. And we did, and lo and behold, sure enough, it's flat. There's not a curve can be found anywhere.
Water doesn't bend.
Water can't find any bent water. This is one of those elusive will-o'-the-wisp things they keep telling you. You're sitting on the shore, you got a bathtub full of water, it's flat. They say, yeah, and the water here on the shore is flat, but it's just a little further. It's bent. And you get on your ship and you sail out there, no, it's a little further. But, you never find it. There's no bent water. It's impossible. It's actually like a law of God. The world is flat.
Charles, how about the pictures that the spacecraft have taken of the Earth? We can see that it's a ball.
completely faked. We've got Hollywood out here. They've been doing some amazing things with special effects. And, and Disney was one of the creators of the moon landing. Nothing like that is happening. What actually happened in all these years, these over 2,000, 2,500 years, these con men have been claiming the world is a globe and never found any proof, not even a hint of any proof exists, that the world is a globe. So they decided to fabricate proof.
Why would they fabricate it? Why would they try to lie to us?
Well, in other words, like we've got these big churches and scientific outfits, that claim to represent God and claim to know everything, and they've been claiming it's a ball all these years, and we come along and say that it's nothing like that at all. It throws them out of a job, doesn't it? So in other words, once they started to lie, they have to keep it up. So they had to find some way to support it. And it's actually, in order to try to finally do away with the Flat Earth Society altogether, that Nikita Khrushchev and the Russians, trying to do away with God and all truth, began the Sputnik. And Kennedy over here, his partner, joined the gang with him. I've got actually pictures of them both laughing and hooping and hollering together as they laid this big joke on us both. They're playing games and making money out of it.
You were serious about this?
The Earth and Kennedy says, yeah, that's nothing, I'll go to the moon. And then back over there, they said, look, they're going to the moon over there. Let's donate some more money, we'll go to Venus. So we're just playing games and also deluding the people and also maintaining this ancient fiction that the world is a ball.
You're really serious about this?
Oh, absolutely.
How about the whole business of creation, though, and how scientists are explaining that, how the world came into existence and all the other planets and everything?
Well, in the first place, when you speak of other planets, that's where you go off. That's one of those subtle tricks that the masters of deceit use. There's planets, but you don't say them other planets, because Earth is not a planet. Nothing to do with a planet.
When you stand out in wait a minute, when you stand out in your backyard there and you look up, what are you looking at when you see stars?
Oh, a few little pinpoints of light. I mean, who knows or cares about these little pinpoints? This is the Earth, the world. I mean, this is it. We've got a little light to light us, and we've got these little twinkling stars. I mean, in first place, that's one of the tricks of the priesthood. Like maybe over in India, where the thing actually originally began, is people laying drunk, and doped out of their head. They fall out on their back, and that's all they can see is the stars. So they start thinking about stars. I mean, who cares about the stars?
You're in California, but I'd swear you're from Missouri.
Well, I mean, this is exactly. I mean, it's that idea of being from Missouri. This is what we should all be, and we all would be, except that we're unnaturally programmed when we're little children and helpless. They shove you into those schools, and they've got these trained programmers, just like something from a Nazi film that'll force those little minds. The average little mind sees at once when you give him a globe that it's silly, just as I did. But they force him through peer pressure. They have a thing set up to force his brain into insanity.
When did you first see the light? Did you do this while you were still in school? I take it you flunked several geography courses and said, hey, this is not the way it is.
I think I was about 8 years old when they first produced the globe with me, and I told them at once, I said, this is the silliest thing I ever heard of. What are you talking about? The water will all fall off. That's silly. and no one's given you an answer yet.
You put out a newsletter, as I understand it.
I beg your pardon?
You put out a newsletter all the time, don't you?
Yeah, we publish a paper called the Flat Earth News. It's quarterly. It's $10 a year.
What can you possibly talk about in periodical form?
Oh, my goodness. We're on next issue will be number 56, and we never said the same thing twice. I mean, there's so much evidence. There's so much different ways of diagrams. Right now we're showing vast diagrams of how things have been falsified and how the actual the shape of the world, and we also I actually believe that God exists. Actually, the church, the so-called Christians, Jews, one thing or another, have all been have been taken over by this science thing. That's the new world religion, science, which is totally atheist. And this is actually why our country has come to pieces, in my opinion, and is totally collapsing right before our eyes, is the space program. In that it's the final straw of trying to convince the people there's no God, there's not a word of truth in our heritage, which is, like the Bible. Because if the space program is true, then you can throw the Bible out, and actually we should go out and chase the people that ever brought it to us.
Not necessarily. Let me ask you this, in all seriousness, John, or Charles. How do you know that the space program is showing you false information? How do you know that the Bible is truth? If you want to go at it that way.
Well, actually, you're right there as far as knowing the Bible is true. But there is the idea that there is a creation or that it's not a creation is a big issue. In that, if there's a creation, then things have been created. There must be a right way and a purpose to the thing. And if there is no creation, if things just happenstance into being, then there's no right and there's no wrong. But we know the space program is entirely false because we know the world is flat.
It's 19 after 10 o'clock. I have to break for a commercial or two. We'll be back with Charles Johnson. If somebody has a question they'd like to pop at you, could they do that, Charles?
Yes, that'd be okay.
829-2345. You're really serious about this. You have, 1,600 people that subscribe to this newsletter.
Yeah, well, we have a few more than that.
We'll be right back.
If colder weather and lower thermostat settings are leaving you cold this season, visit Wild Country to see their full selection of quality Woolrich clothing. From classic Woolrich wool shirts to high-performance Woolrich insulated parks, Wild Country has what it takes to keep you nice and warm through the worst winter weather. Stop by Wild Country soon and discover just how warm cold weather can really be. And while you're there, be sure to get your free copy of the Woolrich Cold Weather Clothing Guide, filled with important information about your comfort and safety in winter. It's available at Wild Country, 203 South Linden, Normal.
In a distant land, Santa's elves are especially busy making you something special. A gift from McDonald's. A stuffed reindeer ornament just like the reindeer in Santa Claus the movie. And it's free when you buy a $5 book of McDonald's gift certificates. So put plenty of both on your Christmas list. And look for Santa Claus the movie at a theater near you.
It's a good time for the great taste of McDonald's.
Offer good while quantities last at participating McDonald's.
We're going to be talking to the guy that played Santa Claus in that movie in future shows. I don't know, is that about a week or so away? Believe so. It's 21 after 10. We'll be back with Charles Johnson in half a minute.
Christmas time is house guest time, and Mr. Discounts has the sleepers for that needed sleeping space as well as beautiful furniture to grace any home. See Mr. Discount's tremendous selection of sleepers in colonial, traditional, or contemporary design, most with innerspring mattresses and many featuring matching love seats and chairs. Prices start at a low $4.99 for sleepers by the leading makers in full and queen sizes. So why add a room to accommodate your holiday guests? Add a beautiful sleeper instead. A quality sleeper at a low, low price from Mr. Discounts, 908 El Dorado Road in Bloomington.
Charles, let's take a phone call. Sir, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering how does he explain the 24 hours a day the sun come up and the sun goes down? You know, otherwise it'd be daylight all the time or dark all the time.
Yeah. How does that happen?
Okay, this is the way it is now. I'll have to describe the way the world actually really is first. There's one vast sea, one vast world of water is what exists. Actually, just as it's described in Genesis 1:1, the magnetic north, or the so-called North Pole, is the center of the known world, and the lands are stretched out. They're all like islands stretched out around this magnetic north. By the way, we have a true map that members will be able to get. And the sun is a small light. It's about 32 miles across. It's 3,000 miles high. And it moves in a circular course over near the equator. And if you can imagine yourself out on a dark night walking in a circle, it's pitch dark, but you're holding a flashlight up pointed at the ground. Wherever you are, the flashlight is, it's day, and as you keep walking in this circle, when you leave, then it's dark, and it's light in another place. As this sun moves in a circular course around the world, it's daylight, and as it moves away, it becomes dark. It's light further on, and let's stay at night.
Charles, has anybody ever gone off the edge? Because it sounds like you may be very close.
Well, now this is one of the points of the whole thing. If the world were a globe, you would go over the edge, obviously. In fact, that was the great trouble up until Columbus came along and demonstrated the world was flat. People believing, in fact, this is one of the original points too of the criminals, you might say, who invented the grease ball, the people in Greece, was to keep people from sailing out and discovering anything in the world, because they say it's a globe, and so if you sail out very far, obviously you go over the edge. That's what they teach in the school textbooks to the kids. They say, if you watch this ship, it'll sail right over the edge, and that proves the world's a globe. So, and somehow people's brain is double programmed backwards, and they tell them that the flat Earth is the one that has an edge. But of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Obviously, a flat Earth wouldn't have an edge, an available edge. But, there wouldn't be any water.
Sir, did he answer your question?
Yeah, I think kind of had him stuttering a little bit there, trying to come up with something, but yeah, it's pretty close, I guess.
All right. Thanks. Anybody else? 829-2345. I'd like to talk about this analogy you just mentioned when we set up this conversation yesterday about creation.
Yes, well, see, this is a very, very big point. Now, certain enemies of the whole creation thing, I think, are the ones who get involved, trying to get creation into schools and all, and they sit around and quote scriptures all the time, and that's why they can't get their law passed properly. But the idea of there being a creation, it makes all the difference in the world. For instance, here's what is taught in the public schools, that that everything just accidentally over a long period of time come into being. Mm-hmm. But to show how asinine it is, you can imagine if you went out in the field somewhere and you found a new car sitting there with the lights burning and the radio playing and the motor running, and you couldn't see where it come from. You said, well, obviously this thing, it just evolved out here. These jackrabbits running by and kicking the clouds, it turned into this car. Well, this is exactly what the poor children, this is why our children are so moronic these days. Have you noticed it? They don't know anything, because their brain is messed around like this where you can't think logically. Well, obviously those jackrabbits, no matter if they run by and kick those clouds, for hundreds of billions of years, it's not going to turn into a car with a motor running and the lights on. There has to be a creator. In other words, with common sense, when you see the car sitting there and the motor running, the car has been created. And there's a right way to drive it, for instance. You got to put oil in it. there's all sorts of things. Since it was created, there's a way to run it. So if there's a creation, then there must be a right and a wrong. For instance, people tell you now, who are you to say this is right or that's...
But are you saying we shouldn't really worry about who created it then? We just take for granted that it was created and...
Well, yeah, and then to seek out the right way that we should all function together now. And in our case, we believe the Ten Commandments are actually reasonable, logical basis of living. Thou shalt not murder, for instance. That really sounds logical to me.
Sure does. But Charles, why do I get the feeling that I'm talking to a guy that probably always drives down the wrong way on a one-way street?
I don't think you'll find me as a logical person. Rational.
Yeah. Oops, I had a line ringing there, and somebody gave up before I got to him. I don't know if you have another question or not for Charles.
The Earth being flat is one of the few things that you can ever really know for sure. It's something that don't change. It'll never change. And as long as time lasts, the world will be flat, and it's always been flat and can always be proved. And the greaseball religion, we call it greaseball because it's supposed to come from Greece. Public school system says it comes from Greece. It's the greaseball religion. It is a religion. We can never find any proof for it because there's no truth in it.
I think it'd be a hard one to try to change your mind.
Even the word the Polak who devised a particular system. It come from Greece 2,500 years ago, but a Polak, like...
You mean a Polish person?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Invented the present system the particular way, and from his name has come a word meaning poison. His name is spelled C-O-P-E-R-N-E-C-I-O-U-S, Copernicus.
Copernicus.
C-O-P-E-R-N-E-C-I-O-U-S, that's Copernicus, isn't it? The word pernicious itself was taken from his name. It's a deadly poison. His whole theory is a poison.
Well, he proved that the sun didn't go around the world, but the world went around the sun.
Yeah, this was what he put forth.
Let me take another call if you don't mind.
Okay.
We're running out of time. Do you have a question?
Yes, I wonder if this professor has bought the principle of gravity yet.
Yeah, how about that business of gravity?
Well,
good point, sir.
Not a thing in the world of gravity. I mean, in the gravity, obviously things that are heavier than air fall, and like, let me give you an example of how kind of absurd gravity is. The theory of gravity comes from the poison man. Is claiming that things fall because of all these globes. Everything is a globe. It's all balls, and they're all whirling. Like, for instance, I have a cup of coffee sitting here on this coffee table. If I push it off the table, obviously I know why it falls because there's nothing supporting it. But according to the theory of gravity, why it falls is because of a bunch of balls whirling a few million light years away. I mean, what are we talking about? Gravity, there's nothing to it. In fact, Newton himself, we have an actual copy, a reproduction of a copy of a letter he wrote to a friend a few years after he devised this science fiction theory. His friend was reprimanding him for publishing anything so silly, and it might confuse people's minds and bring ignorance into the world instead of enlightenment. And Newton, we've had his letter, is stating, don't worry about that because there's no one in their right mind, no one that actually thinks reasonable and logical will ever take it seriously. The absurdity of such an idea. This coffee cup falling because there's balls whirling millions of miles away. I mean, there's no sense in it.
Sir, do you care to respond?
Well, I just wondered whether he was in favor of gravity or not.
No.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Not even the gravity of the situation, huh?
Well, it is a very grave situation. In fact, our society, I'll just mention this, our work, this is my claim, is by far the most important work going on Earth. As far as an individual person is concerned, any of our listeners, what I'm telling them is the most important thing they could ever learn in their life because it is the one and the only way they can ever be sane.
Okay. Let me try one more phone call if Dwayne can wait here in the news. Do you have a question?
Yes. If this gentleman says the world is flat, I'd like to know where the edge is. I'd like to go there and look over the edge. Well,
actually, the world is, obviously, being flat, it doesn't have an edge you could get to, because all the water would fall, wouldn't it? No, the known world is this one big sea. The lands are stretched out around the magnetic northeast. The southernmost distance that you can reach. In other words, a ring around the known world is frozen, solid. If you get in a ship and sail south, you'll come to ice. You'll come to a big ridge of ice. In fact, from then on, you can only penetrate a few miles into this vast barrier of total ice, darkness, and cold. And there's where the water stops. You see, there's where the buck stops. There's where the water stops, and it's laying out flat and stretched back.
So it's this ice that keeps all the water from running off this flat table.
But of course, if you'd like to go look over the edge, if you really believe the world's an edge, you just get in a ship and go out about anywhere 20 to 30 miles, and you will start downhill over the edge. And on your way to Australia, you'll finally come to the point where your ship will be standing straight up and down as you go over the edge. And then you'll sail upside down into Sydney, where everybody hangs by their feet upside down, if the world were a globe, which of course it's not.
Ma'am, did that answer it?
It's a little hard to swallow, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah, by the way, my wife came from Australia, and she's testified under oath that she never hung by her feet when she was in Australia.
Okay. How about in China? I guess they don't either.
No, in China, in fact, we have friends just a few months ago, flew over from there, and they go back and forth all the time, and they only laugh, when they hear this American expression, Australia being down under.
Charles, let me pass along your address. In fact, if you give it to me, everybody else can copy it down too if they're interested in what you have to say.
Yeah, anyone who's interested, I sure want to be writing. It's the Flat Earth Society for short. Actually, it's the Flat Earth Research Society International, but right, the Flat Earth Society, Box 2533, Lancaster, California. Lancaster, California. Zip code 93539. Lancaster, California, zip code 93539.
Okay.
And we have an information application sheet that I send out to all who write. And it's possible then that they can get the Flat Earth News. It's $10 a year, but I'd like for people to sign this application first.
Okay. You want them to send a self-addressed stamped envelope or anything?
Yes, I'm sure it'd be a great help.
Okay. Flat Earth Society, Box 2533, Lancaster, California, 93539. Gotta go. I'm way behind. It's nice to talk to you.
Well, it's been very nice talking to you, and
all right.
I'd be glad to talk to you anytime. Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.